¿Qué tal estáis, gente? Bienvenidos al stream de Newtral. Todavía falta bastante gente por entrar, pero bueno, tenemos a una invitada al otro lado y no le quiero robar muchísimo tiempo porque ha sacado un espacio para charlar con nosotros. Hoy va a ser una jornada bastante intensa, 2 entrevistas. Primero tenemos a Hanna con nosotros y después tendremos también a Javier Espinosa, que va a estar más tiempo a partir de las 10 de la noche, hora peninsular de España. Ahora estamos con Hanna Liubakova, que ella es periodista de Bielorrusia y ahora mismo no está en Bielorrusia porque no puede volver. Ahora nos responderá ella por qué exactamente no puede volver. Esta entrevista va a ser íntegramente en inglés. No voy a traducirla porque si no vamos a perder mucho tiempo y creo que es importante intentar sacar la mayor cantidad de información de ella porque es una fuente muy interesante del lugar de los hechos. Es una de las crisis más grandes a nivel migratorio que está teniendo Europa desde lo que ocurrió con los refugiados sirios hace unos años, con toda la entrada desde el este, sobre todo en Grecia. Así que voy a pasar ya con Hanna. Como digo, vamos a empezar a hablar en inglés y nada, si tenéis preguntas, lanzadlas también por el chat, aunque vamos un poco jodidos de tiempo, pero bueno, aún así yo lo intento, ¿vale? Así que now, wait, give me a second, that I didn't put it correctly here. What happened? Give me 1 second, Hanna. Oh, there you go. Okay, here. I don't know why when. Oh. Okay. Now you're here. Okay, so Hanna, hello. Thank you so much for doing this. You were telling me before that you're not in Belarus. Can you give me a little bit of details of why are you not in Belarus right now?
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I cannot speak Spanish, so this is going to be in English. I had to leave Belarus a while ago, actually, because of repressions, because, security forces were basically looking for me, and it was just too dangerous for me to stay there. And actually, at first, when I left, there was surveillance. There was they were monitoring me, and then I knew that at some point I would have to leave, like forever, or at least for some time. But when I left, I remember that I thought that after 1 week I would be able to come back, and I took only like a little bag with me. But then it just turned out that I'm not, like it's I was recommended not to come back, let's say. So since then I'm abroad and I'm not able to travel back as many of my other colleagues.
And when this started exactly? So you have to go back how many years in terms of having that, people surveilling you, the government in this case. When this started and why?
Mm-hmm. So I was covering the situation in Belarus before the elections when we were having all these protests across the country, and I was one of the very few English-speaking journalists, and I also spoke at some events at some side events at the UN. I briefed American congressmen and so on. So I was kind of involved into that, and at some point I just noticed this surveillance because I was very vocal, I was very critical, because many people around the world listened to me. So there was. Basically, it was actually very funny. So I was in this small town. It has some 16,000 population. And I think they were not very professional because I was interviewing somebody. I think it was June or July last year. And I spoke to this person. And when we stood up, this person that was sitting not far away from us also stood up. So it was like in those movies where, these sort of special agents, they're so obvious, you can actually recognize them. So the same happened. And I was like, oh, okay, that's funny. And that was this small town. And it was obviously very much harder to notice the same in larger cities. But my friends, my colleagues also told me that they had surveillance, they were monitored, they were observed. So I also remember during the election protest, the protest right after the election.
This was
in Belarus in August
last year, correct. Yeah.
August last year, there were police drones flying around the city, and I remember like there was this moment when they were literally following us. It was so creepy. We were a small group of journalists, and they were literally following us well, we were staying at a hotel. So basically, well, many situations when you kind of felt that, it's at some point it would be good if you just leave the country. So that point happened, I left, and after that I was not able to come back.
Yeah, because you're telling us that it's funny, but at the same time it's terrifying, right? And you were telling me before that there was a friend of yours that, the whole situation with the plane that was going from, if I remember correctly, was from Greece to Lithuania and was stopped when it was traveling around Belarus. Can you tell me what happened then, and how were you already outside of the country or not?
Oh yes, I was. I left last year, so kind of many months ago. So Roman Protasevich was. He's a blogger. He's a very prominent blogger, a journalist, and he was behind this largest Telegram channel in Belarus called Newtral. Telegram is the social media platform, very popular in Belarus, that was very kind of instrumental, very crucial during the protests. So Roman was editor-in-chief of this channel, and he was even added to this KGB terrorist list.
Wow.
Last year. He's like 26 or something. He's very young. And then he was making fun of it. He was like, well, am I a terrorist or what? So, but he left the country also, well, even before, I think in 2019 or something. And so he was in Warsaw. Then he moved to Vilnius, and he was traveling from Athens, from Greece to Vilnius in May, by the end of May, this year, right? So I knew that he was on the plane, like a group of friends. So we knew that he was on the plane. And then when this plane got diverted, all of a sudden, like it was this really sudden turn, we were like, oh, okay, so this is perhaps because of Roman. So this is not funny at all. So we were not able to publicize this information that he is on board before the plane landed and before he got arrested, because we did not want to draw too much attention to the fact that he was on board. Yeah, so he was arrested, and then it became clear to us, well, that this is very, very serious. And then he was tortured, he was beaten, and he had to, now he's been used as a hostage. He was shown on TV many times saying that, oh, Lukashenko is great. He literally has these steel balls. That's what he was forced to say about Lukashenko. So, so the situation is terrible. We don't really know much about him right now, what's happening with him. He's now under house arrest, and even his parents don't have kind of a lot of connection, a lot of sort of information about him. So the situation continues. It's not over, but well, he's not in jail, at least at this stage.
So we'll get back to this, because it's important to understand the current situation in the border of Poland and, of course, Lithuania and Latvia. But what can you tell me about Lukashenko, in terms of, there's people here that maybe don't have the entire context, but we were talking about the election last year, and now, these decisions that obviously are terrifying for people that are speaking out against the government. So can you tell me a little bit more about him, and why is that there's kind of a sense that people in Belarus need to fight against him?
So Lukashenko came in power in 1994, many, many years ago. Perhaps some of the audience, was not even born back then. So he's this mustache guy, and he became a dictator basically since the beginning. He immediately understood that he needs to control all the power. So he destroyed independent media. He took over control, basically, media, the parliament, the court, every area basically in the state, right, the government and so on, and that continued. There were protests for years, literally every 5 years or something. There were protests in Belarus. They were less successful than the protests last year. So what happened last year? Basically, the majority of the population got really pissed off and wanted him to leave, because firstly, well, it's been 27 years of him in power. This is just too much. Then there was the pandemic, and people saw that he made a lot of cynical remarks about victims of the coronavirus. He is a COVID dissident. He ignored the pandemic, and people died, and people saw that he was lying, and he kind of did not really care. Then the economy, stagnating economy, people are poor, and people blame him because he is in charge of it, right? And then basically, like, the whole mismanagement, and local officials are stealing money. There is a lot of corruption and so on. So people just at some point they decided that it's just too much. We want him to go. And then the election came, and the election is usually this period when people are mobilized. This is natural. It happens everywhere. So last year it was kind of this perfect storm: the pandemic. Again, the economy, in the election, right, which mobilized people.
Just like in the United States, the same thing.
Exactly.
Without a dictator, but yeah.
Without a dictator. This is true, but former president also treated the press perhaps less harshly, but still. Yeah, and Lukashenko basically, he kind of felt that he lost the support of the society, and he was like, okay, so I need to repress them all. And since August, there have been more than 40,000 people jailed.
That's crazy.
And Belarus is a country of 9.5 million. Yeah, well, this is not a large country, right? We have now almost 900 political prisoners in Belarus, and like the level of repression is unprecedented. And people are scared at the moment, but the revolution, I would say, the uprising is not over. People cannot protest. People cannot go to the streets because of this, because of repressions, because of security forces. But it does not mean that people kind of said that, okay, Lukashenko, you can stay. We love you again. So this is not true. This is kind of boiling from inside. And it might explode at any moment. So that's perhaps the situation right now.
So now going back to what happened with Roman and the plane, the European Union, which of course shares a lot of borders with Belarus, they made a response in terms of sanctions, which economic sanctions can be very harsh in a country that already has a lot of poverty, right? And going out of the pandemic, of course, is even more. It's bad for the country. So in those terms, now we're seeing that there's this new migration line coming to the border with Poland, with Latvia, with Lithuania. And what I've been reading is that Belarus is supporting this. They are interested in people like migrants coming from the Middle East coming through Belarus so they can put pressure on the border, put pressure on the European Union, and maybe get the sanctions, go away. Is that exactly what happened? What have you been hearing on the ground in those terms?
Well, this is exactly the case, and you described it perfectly well. I'd only add that this kind of first wave of migrants, first wave of this kind of migration crisis that took place, I actually checked when these contracts between these state-owned tourism agencies and these agencies that helped migrants from the Middle East to come to Belarus were signed. They were signed back in May. So even before the Ryanair incident took place, even before sectoral sanctions were imposed. So Lukashenko planned it in advance. So what happened? There are several state-owned tourism agencies. They literally sell tourism packages to migrants in the Middle East. So these people buy them, they are promised this short and fast way to the EU. They travel to Minsk, they land in Minsk, they fly with some Syrian airlines, Iraqi airlines, Turkish airlines, whatever. So they land in Minsk, they buy some sleeping bags, tents, warm clothes, whatever. They travel to the border and they try to cross the border. So what happened 3-4 days ago on Monday, for the first time, I would say, there was this large group of migrants, several thousand people, who came to the border simultaneously and at the same time, and who tried to cross the border. Firstly, they actually tried to cross the border legally through this official checkpoint. but they were not allowed by Belarusian border guards. They were literally stopped and they were pushed into the forest. And from that forest, migrants were supposed to cross the border like illegally, right?
Wait,
And that's
give me a second so I
understand.
I understood it correctly. Give me 1 second. So you're saying that there were people that were coming with tourist packages through Minsk. They were going then to the border with Poland, and they were trying to get through the regular official checkpoint. And the Belarus officials were not letting that happen, and they were sending people to the forest because they were not interested for them to follow the usual asylum process.
Exactly. That's exactly
Wow.
the case. At least it's the case with some people. That's what we saw on the videos. That's what we kind of can confirm, because it's been recorded, it's been filmed. Like people are trying to cross the official checkpoint, and there is a number of border guards who are basically standing and pushing them away. So and on Monday we also saw this video with people being pushed to the forest. So what's happening now? These people are basically between the two fires. There are at least, I think, 3,000 people. That's the latest number that we heard from the Belarusian side. They were able to build this tent camp on the border, and they sometimes try to cross the border, but this is when they're stopped by Polish border guards. So they cannot go to Poland. But the thing is, there are Belarusian border guards armed who are standing behind those people and basically force them to go to Poland, right? And even if those migrants would like to come back to Minsk and fly back to Iraq or whatever country they are coming from, they wouldn't be able to, because these border guards, Belarusian ones, are not allowing them back. So the situation is really desperate. More and more people coming from Minsk because they don't perhaps get the full information, or they also feel that the window might be closed, so they want to try to cross the border nevertheless. So that's what's happening.
But it's crazy to me because I was watching a documentary by Vice News that they were talking to this woman that was able to cross the border and get to Poland just because she hurt her leg, and she was saying that she paid $4,000 to coming from Damascus to Minsk and then going to the border just because they were hearing a lot of news stories or maybe just messages that they were receiving about how easy it was to cross the border from Belarus to Poland. But now we're seeing news stories about a Kurdish boy, minor, I don't know how old specifically, that has died in the forest. How's the situation, or what you're hearing about how many people are dying or could potentially died just because they're there and they cannot cross to Poland, but they cannot go back to Minsk or anywhere else?
So since the beginning of the crisis, we know about at least 10 people who died.
10 people
on either Belarus. So since the beginning, right? Not in the past.
Okay.
But throughout, at least 10 people, which might mean that there were more, but this is not confirmed. So these people were discovered in Belarus or in Poland, right, on the border. Now, what we heard about this 14-year-old boy who died, the Kurdish one, as you mentioned. But there was also another video with migrants, bringing somebody on this stretcher.
Oh, yeah.
And they were saying that, this person died, so we are in a really terrible situation, we need help. I cannot confirm whether this was another person or the same boy. This is not clear, but there was at least somebody who was also kind of on this stretcher, right? So this is not clear. We cannot say that, but I saw videos of people being beaten, being injured, being freezed basically, and they kind of they're saying that they don't really feel well. There was this story about a pregnant woman who lost her child, and she's now in the hospital. Yeah. So the situation there is really terrible. Today there was food delivered from the Belarusian side to the border, and migrants even had to fight for this food. Like they literally don't have, I imagine, enough food, right? So they had to fight for it.
And one question that I have is that I was, reading about the option of, or maybe there's some migrants that are going also to the border with Latvia and Lithuania. why is not that happening as much as it could? And what I mean is that why are we seeing like hundreds of people in the border with Poland and they're not trying to go somewhere else? It's because the Belarus officers are not letting them and they want the crisis to be like very specifically in that part of the border, or what?
So well, firstly, the crisis started, they started to arrive at the Lithuanian border. So that's where the whole crisis started, not a few days ago, but a few months ago, right? And then Poland became the second country, I would say, for migrants. But the first the primary country was actually Lithuania. Latvia has, I think, the least number, the lowest number of attempts to cross the border. So why is it happening? Why are they attacking Poland at this, going to Poland at this stage? It's not clear. Maybe because it's easier to go to Germany because that's kind of their ultimate destination. At least that's what they're saying. I cannot say. Maybe it's also because of some political reasons. Because the regime in Minsk is interested now in provoking or escalating the situation at the Polish border, and that's how they kind of created or allowed this situation to happen. I would say no definite answer to this. It might be absolutely accidental, or it might be because the regime is just more interested in provoking Poland.
Well, it would make sense to me because they're very nationalistic, the government in Poland. So the response is going to be even more controversial, I guess. But my other question, which I have not asked yet, but it was about the relationship with Russia. We know that Putin has been talking to Merkel this couple last few days, and what's the relationship with Lukashenko, and what do you think has been happening in terms of, has been Putin made pressure to Belarus to change the situation? I know that Lukashenko also has threatened Europe to cut the natural gas pipeline that goes through the country to Europe, which would be crazy because we have an energy crisis at the moment.
Well, I would say it was very brave of him to say that, because he's not in control of the contract signed between Russia and whatever country, Poland or Germany. So if Russia signs this, Gazprom, the Russian company, signs these contracts, they would have to deliver gas to these countries. And I think Lukashenko would not have a say there. So I think the Kremlin would be really pissed off if Lukashenko would stop the transits. So I think this is not up to him to do this. But when it comes to these calls and the conversation between Angela Merkel and Vladimir Putin, so she called him. So I think they had two conversations as of now, and basically Merkel's message is that Putin should influence Lukashenko to stop the migration crisis. Yesterday, the communication followed that, well, it's not up to me, it's up to Lukashenko to stop this. But I think they're still trying to find a common ground and try, at least Merkel obviously tries to find a solution and influence Putin to sort of force Lukashenko to come to senses. So the Kremlin is perhaps the only, unfortunately, stakeholder at this stage that has influence over Lukashenko, and that's why so much depends on Putin at the moment. But let's see, because Russia also uses this crisis in its interest. They criticize Poland, Lithuania for human rights violations, for cynicism, for not allowing migrants to cross the border, and so on. So they basically on the same page with the regime in Minsk, with Lukashenko at this stage.
And my last question would be regarding of how do you see the prospects of this? No, how do you see the future in terms of what's going to happen in the border with Lukashenko? What do you think the decision-making process is going to look like in the next couple of weeks or even months, depending on how much the crisis endures?
So it all depends on the response from the West, I would say. Lukashenko now wants the West to negotiate with him, to talk to him, to legitimize him, so that Lukashenko feels empowered again. And I would say that it's really important not to follow this blackmailing strategy of Alexander Lukashenko. So pressure is important. Pressure is the only tool available to the West and that kind of the tool that Lukashenko responds to. So it's important to increase the pressure. It's important to stop these third country airlines flying to Belarus, such as those Syrian or Iraqi or even Turkish airlines. So that's where kind of one of the sources of the problem, right? They keep flying, and that's how migrants are coming to Belarus. And it's important also to look at the crisis on the international arena. So it's important to engage with the UN Security Council, with the OSCE and other organizations that where Belarus is a member of, so that they can influence the crisis or influence the regime in Minsk. I think Belarusians are also not happy about the situation. They see that their country is becoming a hub for illegal migration. They're not against migrants. They're not against these people, but they just don't want their country to become this hub, for illegal migration, for migrant smuggling. And that's how Lukashenko is shooting himself in the foot as well, because people are angry with him. People know where the source of the trouble is coming from. This is Lukashenko, not those people themselves. So kind of more pressure, more definite kind of, how to say that, more like stronger response from the West is needed at this stage.
The last thing I would say that I haven't mentioned, but what are you hearing about people in Belarus going into the streets to protest about what's happening right now? Because of course there's the economic crisis going on, the pandemic also. I don't know how you guys are doing in terms of vaccination rate, but do you think people are going to go out in the streets to protest what's happening or not?
They cannot protest at this stage because of repressions. But I think there is this self-organization and mobilization, and it's really important that people are still against Lukashenko, and they would not come back to the status quo. Lukashenko will have to leave at some point.
Perfect. So Hanna, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you have to leave, so thank you for giving us 30 minutes of your time. It was a very interesting conversation, and very good luck with everything else, with your work. We will following you. Guys, follow her on Twitter. And yeah, see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bueno, pues gente, la verdad es que, Hanna es una crack, es una figura a nivel periodístico súper importante en Bielorrusia y nada, seguidla en Twitter porque, bueno, está haciendo actualizaciones de todo lo que pasa. Me parecía importante traer a Hanna también, aparte de Javier Espinosa, que va a venir después, porque, bueno, ella tiene un poco más el contexto político, activista de lo que pasa en el país, ¿no? Que al final todo el contexto de lo que ocurre en Bielorrusia y ahora con la frontera con Polonia es súper importante para saber de dónde viene, ¿no? O sea, la situación complicada en la que está Lukashenko a nivel político influye muchísimo en que quiera buscar esta forma de presionar, y lo fuerte es que esté tan preparado, ¿no? Porque podríamos pensar muchos que esto es una caravana de migrantes que viene desde Oriente Medio, pero en realidad es que están viajando desde Irak, desde Turquía, desde el Líbano en aviones, con unos paquetes de turista que se gasta la gente $3.000, $4.000 porque les cobran eso y se plantan en Minsk y luego van hacia la frontera, ayudados por el ejército bielorruso. Entonces esto es una salvajada, pero que ha creado esta crisis tan bestia. Sí, o sea, era cortito, pero es que, bueno, Hanna no me podía dar más tiempo y además es que se tenía que ir. Cuando se ha puesto a escribir es porque le estaban llamando y se tenía que ir a toda prisa. Así que, nada, la entrevista la subiremos mañana a YouTube, por si acaso habéis llegado tarde, que sé que algunos habéis llegado tarde. Y si no, de todas maneras, a las 10 de la noche, hora peninsular de España, eso es dentro de 2 horas, vamos a estar con Javier Espinosa hablando sobre su carrera, que es impresionante a nivel de corresponsalías de guerra, pero también sobre la situación en Polonia y Bielorrusia, que él nos puede dar más detalles de lo que ha visto en la frontera. Pues nada, ya nos contará él. Así que nos vemos luego. Muchas gracias por venir por aquí y hasta luego. Adiós. Bye, bye, bye. Gracias. Y dadle follow a Hanna. Escribidle en inglés que thank you so much. Venga, va, hacedme ese favor, que se ha tomado el tiempo de venir por aquí. Thank you so much, Hanna. Bye.